in Stargate SG-1, the four main characters are actually a team that goes through the Stargate and basically goes on adventures and tries to save the world multiple times. I think they actually count during the series how many times that is. And maybe some super fan in the comments can actually say exactly by the end how
Oh
many
my
times
gosh.
that was. Um, so for people that are watching right now, I mean, we've both seen the series obviously the whole way through, but right now we're both rewatching it, and I'm on season 8 and then also season 1 of Atlantis, and you are in season 2, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Yeah. And
so
so like I've watched it all the way through like many, many years ago. And so now like I just started rewatching it, but I'm going through it kind of quickly. So yeah,
yeah.
I'm on season 2 right now.
Yes.
So yeah.
So in the beginning, we'll start with the ensemble cast from the very beginning of SG-1, the original group, which was consisting of 4 members. So this would be um, Jack O'Neill, Daniel Jackson, Samantha Carter, and Teal'c. And interestingly, the first two were actually characters that were in the original Stargate movie that came out in 1994, and that would be Daniel Jackson and O'Neill. And then the other two characters were added. Samantha Carter was brought in already in a pilot as a member of the team because she was a scientist that was working in astrophysics and all the important relevant fields and had been working on the Stargate. And um, then they encounter Teal'c in the first episode, and he joins their cause, but he's actually a member of the enemy faction. And um, I thought one of the things that I always feel like is my favorite part of the show is how the group of the 4 of them kind of interact. And I mean, maybe we can kind of revisit this also after we get to the end of season 8 in SG-1 because that's kind of the end of this 4 group dynamic. But I really like their energy together because I think something that is very special is that when they brought in Richard Dean Anderson for the role, he chose to portray this sort of main character, which is at Colonel Jack O'Neill at the time, later General Jack O'Neill. But he chose to portray the main character with a more like light-hearted, humorous nature than the character in the movie. So the character in the movie was very dark, and I feel like that lightheartedness gave this sort of kind of comedic undertone to the show, even though things were very
Yeah.
serious. But it also gave this sort of dynamic within the group of them and allowed there to be these kind of humorous and goofy moments between them that, I mean, as it goes on, they really get into this more. But I think it also, I mean, there's that element, but we can also discuss that there's the element of because all the characters are so different, they don't agree with each other. So I thought that would kind of be a nice place to start and to talk about. And I mean, maybe
Yeah.
you also, as you're rewatching, have some moments in mind or things in mind that you've seen that you want to say, hey, yeah, this part was especially interesting. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You did very well with describing all of that, far better than I could have done. So thank you. But yes, no, I mean, I totally agree with everything you just said. Like, there's something about the way the 4 of them interact, and it does just, I think, get better as it continues. Like, and I think part of that too is in my opinion, at least, is like with any show, the actors, I would assume, as they are playing the roles more and more, like probably just find themselves connecting with it more and more and bringing things to the character that they then like really truly become that character. And I think with any show, like I've noticed this in other shows too, where in the beginning you feel like they're playing that character, and then after maybe a few episodes you can just feel that like it feels like they are the character, and there's just something that comes together in any kind of series usually that I think is really nice. And so not that I mean like any of them are bad actors or anything like that. I just mean just in general, that's kind of things I notice. And so definitely like I love how um there are the different elements. So it's like with, Jack O'Neill, he's very like sarcastic, but like not in a mean, like, but in a funny way. And then it's kind of like there's all these little subtle things of humor, I think, that it, that's what I love about it, is it's not like, in my opinion, it's not purposely done in a way that is showy and supposed to be funny and like, oh, this is the moment you laugh. It's done in such like a subtle like way that it's like, if you're not like tuned into the fact like there was like something said, you may not catch it and realize the funny moment kind of thing. Like it's done in a very natural way. Um and just like with those characters, like I think uh they all have their different specialties, right? And so I think character-wise that works really well, because it's like if one person like, it's like for example, they have it, especially, I can't remember if it continues like this, if he gradually grows as a human and doesn't do this, but you know, Jack O'Neill, it's like he's very like skeptical of everything usually, and just like has his one way that he thinks to go about it, and sometimes it's kind of like a harsh way. He's not thinking about how things can affect the greater outcome of stuff. And then you have Daniel that comes in and explains like, if you do this, like this might cause this. And then Samantha Carter's kind of the same. And then Teal'c, I think, I don't know, he kind of, in the beginning episodes, just kind of like goes with the flow. He just kind of goes with whatever's going on and just kind of agrees. But yeah, what was I getting at? Sorry, I'm rambling. But like my point being is how their characters specialize in different things and their different types of personalities work really well together in terms of like the stories and how like they figure out things. It works nicely is my point.
Yeah. Well, I think actually you're getting to one of the most important things. I think that, I mean, for me, I love to watch Stargate, especially because it kind of makes you think and reflect on certain things. And I mean, what's very special about it is that it takes place, I mean, obviously, okay, now it's not now anymore, but it takes place here and now. Like it was set in the time it was filmed. It was filmed in
Yeah.
and presented in rather than like 200 years in the future in some fantasy science fiction universe. And I think that kind of makes it really special because we can relate it to our current issue, like our issues and the things that how we relate to each other. And I mean, I think especially there is a lot of that. Like you mentioned how, you know, often, for example, Jack O'Neill and Daniel Jackson will disagree on something. And what I think is very special is that there are a lot of times when, for example, the issue usually that O'Neill has is coming from the military aspect of it. We have to be safe, we have to protect ourselves, we have to, you know, like basically fight the bad guys. And then you have Daniel Jackson who always says, well, wait, can we stop and think maybe they're not the bad guys? And I think there are episodes that show both, and this is what I love about Stargate. There's episodes that show both sides of this. That one, yeah, there is times when you should be very skeptical because there are definitely times when, you know, Daniel has said, "Oh, no, 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 we need to like, you know, think about this from the other perspective," and it's caused like, you know, disaster. And then
Yeah.
there's also
Yeah.
situations where, you know, like, you know, the O'Neill American military attitude of, you know, like, you know, make sure you have yourself at the ready because they, you know, they're probably hostile, where what Daniel has said has kind of come in and it really kind of makes you think. And I've always really loved that they kind of maintain that balance. And I
Yeah.
mean, I think it will probably, it's something we can get into later, especially as they start to kind of, you know, as it goes on, there are some moments where in the show they examine like the military presence, and there is internal within the show criticism about that. And I think that that's something that Stargate kind of always does well is that they don't really let anything be perfect. Like there's
Yeah.
no character or element where it can be looked at without flaw, and I think that's something that's really special about this the cast. That even, you know, even Daniel when he is his super moral and being super empathetic and everything, and but yet this is he makes the incorrect decision at some point, and I think all of them do. I mean, you see even already in like you see that the same thing will happen with Carter because she's coming from the scientific and curiosity aspect of it, and um, I think her character is a little bit kind of, to me, I always found it like a midway between uh, Daniel and Jack, because on the
Yeah.
one hand she is a scientist, and so she does kind of have this more like I guess, evaluative attitude, but she also was trained and has, been on military missions, and so she has a little bit more. So sometimes it's like sometimes she will be on Daniel's quote unquote side and sometimes on Jack's because I think she
Yeah.
kind of toes that. And I mean, one other thing about like just character dynamics that they already show in one, Teal'c has a son and a wife, and you find out that after he leaves them, and it also kind of brings up the like this question of morality of, well, on the one hand, he's fighting this enemy that's oppressing his people. On the other hand, they do bring it up in the show that his family is very mad at him. They've ended up in this position of basically having to live in squalor because he deserted them. And so, what is the right choice there? So, I mean, I guess I'm
Yeah.
just kind of like I was agreeing with your way of like how you said that their interactions and how they kind of relate to one another. It also kind of highlights their strengths and weaknesses without really making one character perfect, which I think is often a flaw in a lot of shows, is that there's some perfect character. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, that's such a good point because that's so true. Like a lot of shows will either have like the person that's like the perfect hero that they always choose the right thing to save everyone, or like they're just the villain, like they always do everything to harm everyone and everything. And it's like not so black and white, and this show's like great with kind of going in that gray area of everyone,
yeah,
and like yeah, and you're exactly right, and it does make you think. I think that's one of the things that like I really like about it too, is that it's like even kind of rewatching it, there's a lot of episodes that like I didn't honestly remember all the different storylines, like of places they went and things that happened, and then it's like now watching it, many many years later, because I think when I first watched it, I don't know how old I was, like I don't know. I can't remember when you told me about the show. Maybe I was in my like early 20s. I wanna say. I don't know. And now I'm in my late 30s, and so it's just kind of, like, interesting to just, like, as ourselves, like, just kind of going and, like, maybe, like, picking up on things that I never picked up on with the characters, and, like, for example, with that Teal'c explanation, like, of that you're saying how he left his family, I'm just like, "Oh, geez," like, that's horrible, like, can you imagine? It's like, it's like these people that live on an other planet, like her husband is like fighting for like, how would you describe it? They're basically fighting for what they believe in, I guess, at that
well,
time.
freedom, really, yeah.
Yeah, and yet then what did his family ever think happened to him? Did they think he died? Like, it's kind of like they don't really know, I don't think. If I remember correctly, they don't realize that he's went, through the Stargate and is suddenly on this team of people. Like, I don't think they knew any of that. And like his son was really little and like so it's like if you like truly think about that, that is so horrible. Like
Yeah.
it's like but then at the same time you can understand like he's fighting for certain things that are good. So it's like those sides of things that, are like questionable, that I think it's just so human to like have both of every person has sides of them that vary just, in the world. And I think like you said, it does really kind of play on that and show that aspect of all of them. Not one person is always super likable. Like, because I could imagine like if it was written differently now, like maybe if it was different writers and it was written now, I can imagine them having it that like Samantha Carter maybe is always the one to always make the right decision,
Yeah.
and Jack O'Neill is always the one to always just be the sarcastic ass that always gets it wrong because he's basing it off of like his past. It's like I could see them really making it something that I think would probably would make it that it wouldn't last as long if it was written in that way, I think. Um but what I do also really like is, and this kind of probably goes a little bit into more of season 2, the beginning of season 2, but, like, is how Teal'c's character, like, um, starts to become funny and, like, has a sense of humor, and, like but what makes it, like, in my, like, opinion, like, the best is that his expression never changes. He never, like, smiles, like, he says it all in a very Teal'c way, and you're left, like, realizing, like, "Oh, he's joking." Like, I think there is, like, an episode where, like, he says something to Jack O'Neill, I can't remember what it is, and then, like and then he's like, "Oh, you're joking, Teal'c,"
Yeah.
like, he didn't realize. Like, oh, it was the episode this may be in season 2,
It
the
is, yeah.
episode where that little, like, orb the little ball thing, like, shoots out spikes and, like, it goes through Jack O'Neill's shoulder. I think
And
that's the
he's
episode where he's stuck there and Teal'c is trying to really help him, and I think that really shows how Teal'c's character, like, has evolved because you can tell he has a sense of emotion there because he's really caring for his friend, and he's learned from, like, the humans, like, like, he's learned people on Earth, he's learned of how, like, they sometimes maybe say things to try and help someone feel better, and like where prior to when they first meet him, he's just very matter of fact to the point of it, being inappropriate at times, right? So it's like cool to see how his character shifts and changes. And like for me, because I have such a stupid sense of humor, like again, I think this was maybe in season 2, but there was, like, an episode where, like, Samantha Carter was, like, talking about oh, maybe it was that same one. It was that same episode, I think. Yeah, it was that same episode when they first are getting the device, they, are trying to retrieve it from the planet, wondering what it is, and Samantha Carter says something along the lines of, like, "Oh, could this be a booby trap?" And then Teal'c just
just
looks
says.
at her and is like, "Booby."
Yeah.
But, like,
Exactly.
his voice, like, said it so strangely, and he did his whole, like, serious Teal'c look, and then, like, Amanda Tapping, like, I think she nearly like, it appears to me as if, like, it was a little bit of Amanda Tapping coming through her character where she almost lost it. Because I know, like, she said when I've watched her in, like, interviews and stuff, like, they've all talked about how, like, funny it was on set, and, like, she just seems like a very, like, funny person that laughs at everything, so, like, I think, like, I kinda wonder, like, how many takes of that they did, like, was that,
Yeah.
like, the
Lots.
original take? Did she lose it? Because I noticed, like, how they edited it together, like, it was just a really quick comment that he says, "She looks highly amused," and then it suddenly goes to Daniel Jackson voice, and it's showing something else, and he's talking all serious about it, so it was, like, very quickly shifted, um that actually reminds me too, like, have you ever noticed and this kinda goes a little bit away from character, but it was just something I just thought of because I noticed it yesterday, um, is have you ever seen an episode where you've, like, noticed something that maybe doesn't make sense to be in that scene because maybe it was there by accident, like, in the world that they're in the planet they're in, and so what I mean by that is, for example, um since I wasn't planning on talking about this, I don't remember, like, the name of the episode or anything, but there was an episode I was watching yesterday, it was from season 2, um, sorry, I really don't know, like, what it was even about. Oh, it was the one with, oh, maybe it would be since what did I say? What episode did I say before we started recording that I was on? I said, like, see
13.
episode 2 is 13. It must have been episode 12 of season 2, I think. And it is where they go onto that world where like it starts off where like a metal like arrow thing shoots through and gets Jack O'Neill again. Gets Jack
Yeah.
O'Neill. He always gets stabbed and poked with things. I think he actually says a line something about how he always gets poked with things.
Yeah.
Um but and then they have like the people kind of seeming like they're similar to Native Americans, but they're on this other planet. So that's the episode. But I don't know if this was supposed to be there, and I think it wasn't. Or maybe I'm losing it. Maybe it's not what I thought it was. But it shows a scene, and it's so, so fast, but it shows a scene when they are on that planet where Samantha Carter is talking and they're trying to figure out where like their people have went, like, and it's showing them on this land. Like, and you know how like a lot of times like when they're on these different worlds, I think, there's probably specific things to those worlds that are there or aren't there, I think, in terms of like wildlife and things like that. And I don't know like if this was something they tried to cut out, but they had to kind of slightly keep it in. And I think like there was like this like butterfly or something that like shot into the scene. And I don't know like if it's something that they didn't want seen because maybe they don't have butterflies in that world or something. And I know that that's not a big deal, but there was something that flew near her like shoulder that like even like you know how like on Amazon Prime you can like click the arrow on your computer to like go back 10 seconds or forward 10 seconds?
I do not know that.
Oh.
I've never watched anything on Amazon Prime.
Oh, have you not? Okay.
No.
Well, yeah, there's a thing where like you can like either click on the screen to go forward
Hmm.
10 seconds or back 10 seconds, or you can just use it on your computer and press the arrows. And so like even that would go too far back for me to kind of or too far forward for me to catch it. So like I had to keep kind of going back, and it was like this white thing that like flashed near her shoulder and then they quickly edited it to a different like scene. So it gave me the impression of like they were trying to not have that be seen in the scene because maybe it was something that flew into the shot that like wouldn't have been on that planet or whatever, and then like they tried to make it like very like not noticed basically. And so it got me like I thought it was kind of funny because it was just like it was like this bright like white thing, unless it was just a light that reflected and I'm losing it thinking it was a butterfly. But like I swore it was a butterfly and I had like tried to rewind it multiple times, just seeing it so fast. Like maybe I'm losing it. That's very possible. Um,
I don't.
but like, have you ever noticed anything like in a scene where you're like, oh, is that really supposed to be there? Like, was that like a mistake or did they try and make it not noticeable?
Yeah, no, I'm the worst for that. Honestly, like everybody I know notices things and I don't. I'm like the
Oh,
like someone's
really?
oh like they'll be like, "Oh, look, you can see in that window that the boom mic is there." Or like, there'll be like bloopers listed online and I never ever ever notice them. Like I think one time they said like something like Teal'c's the thing on his forehead, like his marker was upside down for a whole season. I did not, or for a whole episode, and I did not notice
Oh.
that. I never, I'm like like I do not notice anything. Like I am the best suspension of disbelief. But I mean, I imagine a lot of this there, especially in the past, there's probably much more of this kind of things because I mean, if you have a really good take, you have a really good take. And if something is in the take, like you kind of have to balance like, do I keep the really good take? And I mean, I mean, here's a question at this time, were they recording onto tape or were they recording onto digital media? And I mean, I don't know. I would imagine they would, at this particular point in history, they would be recording onto tape, right? Like, um,
Yeah, I
so
don't know. I don't know like the years that they recorded differently. I'm not sure.
well, actually, I mean, I don't know because, like CDs came out at a certain point, and so then you have this, but that's still a physical storage medium with a limited amount of space. But I don't know, like in the film world, like when did
Yeah.
they make the transition? Because there are a lot of benefits of recording onto tape, I think, versus,
Yeah.
CDs. And so I don't know when they
Yeah.
switched. Maybe if somebody's watching this and is like in the comments can, you know, say this. But I mean, of course, like coming from the music angle of like recording onto digital versus like physical storage, it's a very, very different process. And like for sure, if you have to, I mean, when you're dealing with tape, not only do you have a certain amount of it, but you have to cut it and splice it, and I imagine there's other things. But even if they're recording onto something, like more digital, it's probably
Yeah.
much more complicated than today, I would imagine, and they don't have quite the editing tools And I mean, it was like, I guess at this point, probably shows like this did not have the budget they have today, like
Yeah.
comparatively. So I could imagine there's lots of things. Probably if you went onto IMDb, you could check for bloopers and it will list them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like, yeah, I tend to, I mean, I'm never like when I'm watching a show, I'm not purposely looking for it. So maybe I've probably missed maybe things like that maybe have gotten into the edit that like I've never noticed. But I do actually, I'm the opposite. I do tend to notice those things. Like for
Okay.
some reason I'm very like I don't know,
Focus and
aware of it. I don't know. Like in fact, like I'm the annoying person that when I watch something with someone, like the story will be going on. And if I recognize, like, for example, like an actor from something else, I'll start talking through it and be like, oh, did you know that actor was in this and was in this and was in this? And like my daughter, like Taylor, like she like goes insane when I do stuff like that because she's trying to hear the story. And I'm like babbling about, oh, did you know this person was in that, was in this and this? And I know that doesn't really fully have to do with what we are just talking about, but it's just funny because like I have a habit of doing that. But I've been watching this by myself, so I don't have anyone to annoy with things like that. But
you have yourself. You can like be
yeah.
like talking through it and saying it
Because I
yourself.
have noticed certain actors that like I don't know them by name, but I know they're like well known that like I didn't realize like where hold on, I'm moving my ear, but I hope this doesn't do anything weird. Okay. Um, but there are certain actors that I definitely recognize that are like now in like other shows and everything that I have a feeling when they were first on Stargate, you know, they weren't known yet. And so it's kind of cool to kind of see people and like they're so much younger and I don't know the name of this actor. I'll have to maybe look it up and see, but there was a guy in particular. He didn't have like a big role.
Mhm.
Um oh, and also the lady that played Teal'c's wife, they changed her.
Yes, of course.
Um and so like the first one that then you never see again, that actress was the actress that was in, if I don't know if you've ever watched this show called Eureka, but
Mm-mm.
it's a good
No.
like also sci-fi show that's pretty good and has a lot of humor in it too. So um but
Yeah.
anyways, I'm
Yeah.
rambling on to a different thing. But there was something I was going to actually ask you about the characters is if you can remember. I know it can be hard to kind of think back in the moment, but like when you first started watching Stargate, did you have potentially a different opinion of any of the characters? And did it change as it progressed, or did it change once you started rewatching that you noticed like different things with the characters? So if you kind of try and think back to like whenever you very, very first were introduced to the characters and potentially what you thought about the show and things like that, do you feel like anything has changed then once you've started to rewatch it?
Okay, so this is a very good question. And I mean, I'll reflect it back to you as soon as I answer, but I think one thing that probably will be very important for is that for anyone that didn't see our first episode, I originally watched Stargate out of order for the first time. So
Oh, that's
I
right. Yeah.
I did not see fully the way the characters developed. My first impression, just because like I don't know, I'm this type of person that like I really like character dynamics and story development. I understand visual effects are like cool, but I definitely like I'm this person that hasn't been to the cinema in forever because I'm not so fond of movies that have a lot of like explosions and not much character development. It's really important for me. I have to
Mhm.
like be invested in a character to like care what happens in the story and what happens on
Yeah.
screen. And so for me, like I mean, and again, as I said, I watched later episodes first, so it's kind of a bit unfair because I didn't watch the characters. But like you can tell, like even from you turn on an episode like later on, and the character dynamic and the relationships between the group of the four of them was what I kind of made me really like the show.
Yeah.
I like how they bantered back and forth. I like how they each had these different personalities. I like how everybody had a sense of humor and the show had a sense of humor with itself. And I think
Yeah.
like, you know, that's why to me, like one of the most important lines of the show is O'Neill saying something like, I don't trust anyone without a sense of humor because there's so many times where even in Atlantis they reflect that, where if you, that there's this sort of like, almost universally, humor can show that a character is not like a bad guy, quote unquote. And
Yeah.
sometimes when there's foreshadowing because there's people you don't realize are going to be bad guys, and they always never have a they never have a sense of humor. So for me, like I would say, even rewatching it later, like there's some things I think of more complex, like more with more complexity, like or have a different layer. Like there's always different layers when you watch things like much later when you're kind of, I guess, wiser and have a different relationship with certain things. But that's probably one thing that actually hasn't changed for me is that, you know, I really love the characters for what they were and their kind of
Yeah.
personalities and their flaws and how they related with one
Yeah.
another. So what about
Yeah.
you? I mean, you watched it actually in order. So, I mean, how is this for you? Do you feel
Yeah.
differently or
I don't think I feel differently. I think I like them just the same. Like I think like how you explained it probably is exactly how I feel, to be honest. Like um is I like the dynamics of the characters together and their relationships together and how they interact with each other. And I think that's what makes the whole show. Like if it was just about missions and just about like the ultimate goal of that mission, like if that was just the sole purpose and there wasn't much to the characters and how they interact, like it wouldn't be the show that it was, I think. And so yeah, I mean, I think because it was so like a long time ago that like I first watched it, it's kind of hard for me. And I know it's unfair because I asked you the question too, and you watched it before I did, I think. But like, it's hard for me to kind of fully remember like how I maybe felt when I first started watching it. But yeah, I don't think anything's changed. If anything, I just like the characters even more. And then it's just kind of like nostalgic to kind of like be watching it, and then it's almost like you get like, I don't know if this happens to you, but it's almost like sometimes it's certain like things you really like. It's like then when you go back to it, it's like this like happy little nostalgic feeling that you get like as you're watching it. Like I just get really excited to like watch the show, and I get like really happy just to like hear the theme song. Like um us being music composers, which I don't think we've mentioned on this podcast, at least, that we both are music composers. So it's like, even just with the music, I just like, I love the music so much, like, and so like, even just like the theme song, like in the beginning, like a lot of shows when that plays, like, you kind of get sick of it after a while. And I don't mean that as a disrespect to any of the composers out there, but it's just true. Like if you're watching a show and you hear the music that plays in the beginning, a lot of times you just skip it. And while I sometimes still do that just because I want to start watching the show, like I honestly like a lot of times just keep it playing because like I really like love the intro and I love like the music and it just makes me happy. And I like how like, because like I'm a film composer, so like I like how like with the intro of that, like I recognize like the parts where like they're having the music hit at certain like key points, and like it's just really cool. Like I love it. And so yeah, but yeah, in terms of what you asked me, no, I think the characters I just like just as much, if not more, but nothing's actually like changed. I did have one other question for you. Like I was thinking about the characters and I was thinking about like how they are in the first season. And I know like as the show continues, they kind of try and have the whole thing. Like I don't honestly fully remember what happens with it, but I do remember like throughout all of Stargate, they kind of have, or SG-1, they have this dynamic with Carter and O'Neill, like where it's like, are they, aren't they, are they interested in each other, aren't they, is anything ever gonna happen kind of thing. Like, um, but like I kind of feel like if I'm thinking about their personalities, like truly thinking about how they portray themselves in the beginning, I would have thought that maybe Daniel Jackson and Samantha Carter would become a thing just because they're both so like brainy and like sometimes really interested by the same things, that at least in the beginning, Jack O'Neill doesn't necessarily have that same kind of excitement about, that I would imagine them maybe liking each other and becoming a thing. And so like, are there any like characters in it that like you kind of ship together, like
Yeah,
that you
that is
kind of
that is so interesting because like I don't know if it's just for me, uh Carter and Daniel Jackson always just seemed like friends. Like to me,
yeah.
it's like I kind of think of it like they're so like okay, like I have this friend Pablo and we're super alike, right? But
Mhm.
there's nothing, we could be but like we're like brother and sister. And I always
Yeah.
felt that between Sam and Daniel, that it was
Oh,
very
okay.
kind of
Which
like
makes sense. Yeah.
besties. I mean, I could see where you would ship them, but it's funny because like I always like to me I would imagine that the reason that like Carter and O'Neill might work a bit better is because they have more complementary like they're a little bit more like there's some things that she's missing that he has and vice versa. And actually like I mean if you get into it later, I think he has like a lot of like interest in astronomy, like or sometimes they've shown him like it seems to be kind of like an amateur interest of his. And I think he kind of is
Ah,
really
okay.
smart, but he puts on that he isn't. Like he kind of it's a little bit of like
Yeah.
a persona. But yeah, no, I could totally I could totally see that. The one I think that they did try, like, I mean, it's very subtle, but when I watch through, I can actually see it, but I didn't know it until I read it, like from, I think it was like Michael Shanks talking about this somewhere, like in some biography I read or something, that actually Daniel Jackson and Dr. Fraser, apparently there's some chemistry between them that I didn't know, like that they have a like a
What?
deep, and I never really noticed that, but like if you watch it, like there is a little bit of something like where they just put a little bit of subtle, like they care about each other a little bit more than maybe it would be expected, but it's very
Oh,
subtle. Yeah.
wow. I wouldn't have noticed that at all. Like to me, she seems so like, I don't know, just so into her work. Like she just like that's all her focus. It's just always like I don't know. She seems like um that's interesting. I'll have to pay attention to that. I would have never ever
Yeah.
thought of that actually.
But yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to hear what other people's ships are because I know there's a lot of people that ship people in Stargate, and or people that hate, like I know that there's people that hate that like Carter and O'Neill were kind of, sort of shipped together. But I also remember like in the beginning, like some of the first episodes, like they really try to kind of make O'Neill a little bit like a, I don't know, like a Captain Kirk. Like they tried to put him in this role of having in a few episodes where like he had, he met someone off world that like it became a thing. But I think it doesn't work with his
True.
character because I actually think he's more of like he's not a player. Like his character doesn't give me this kind of vibe of like finding a woman on every planet kind of thing, which, he's more of like you know, I guess I mean, stable isn't the right word, but like he likes to go fishing and and be alone and live a quiet life, and like probably like if anything he would be isolating himself and hanging out with animals or something rather than like that's kind of like the
Yeah.
impression that I got. Um and I think that, I mean, it's very interesting to me because they do have different interests and I like different characters. Like they do have in certain episodes where like some character might be really interested in one or they have a certain bond. And I mean, I don't know how far you are in season two, if you've gotten to the episode called the Tok'ra yet or not.
Yeah.
You have. So you've seen this situation because I think in terms of shipping, this is the thing that I found like, I mean, it's such a complicated and nuanced like layer that, you know, of course, Sam Carter played through a a situation they were in off world. She played host to a symbiote that was not a Gould but a Tok'ra, and that she later met the host of and the basically the mate of the Tok'ra that she was a host to, and because she had like they blend entirely with the symbiote, she had the feelings of that symbiote, and the the mate of her symbiote basically could sense that in her, and it's this really complicated thing that I
Oh my
find so
gosh, yeah.
fascinating because it's like, and then you think, well, what if like the symbiote actually doesn't like, the person, and then but the person playing host does, and like how do you get two beings to
Yeah.
like, it seems so complicated and nuanced, and like, I mean, in a way it almost like gave a very, like an oddly, like I don't know how to explain it, but it gave kind of a different view on relationships, because a lot of times, like,
Yeah.
shows will show like that you have, oh yeah, there's two people, they fall in love and they're the only person for each other, and it's like super, but this, it kind of gave this layer of complexity to it that, I mean, it's kind of like not really describable because you can't really
Yeah.
parallel it to anything, but it kind of, I found that really interesting actually.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't tell like in that episode because I actually just watched, I think that was episode 12, I think.
Hmm.
I can't remember if that was one of the episodes that was in a two-parter. No, I don't think
Yes,
it
it
was.
was.
Or was it? Okay. Um, because that's also the episode where like her dad like goes to the
Yep.
planet and stuff. But the head lady, and this is where I'm terrible with remembering characters' names, so I don't know if you would remember her, but the lady that was like the head of the Tok'ra,
Hmm.
um, like the leader, whatever you would call her, I felt like they were giving like a vibe between her and Jack O'Neill.
Oh yeah.
Like
Maybe.
I
Oh.
couldn't tell. Like there was like it was like for like like it was like after he was like helping them a lot and like
Uh-huh.
because at first she didn't trust him and didn't like him.
Yeah.
But then, like, because like she trusted him, it was just like this interaction. I'm like, at first when I was watching it, I was just like, oh, is something gonna like happen between the two of them? Like, um, but it's weird because I have, and this is kind of off topic a little, but I have had situations where I've watched a show where I thought there was a vibe between two characters, but they don't have anything happen with them in the show. And then you realize if you dig far enough that like it was actually the actors that were involved. And so you were sensing it. That actually happened on an episode of The Orville where these two characters are interacting and I was just like, "Oh, like she seems a bit young for him. Are they really going to go down that road and like have them be involved?" And like then I looked into it like I forget how I think I by accident looked into it that I actually found out that those two characters like the actors were involved and he was like 25 years older than her but like they were involved in real life and so like I wonder like was I picking up on something between Jack O'Neill and the character that like he was interacting with, like did they do that on purpose or maybe I'm just thinking it like that there was a vibe or maybe in real life there was something going down, who knows.
We'll never know. Oh my gosh. But yeah, no, I totally, totally know what you mean. I mean, it's interesting because there were people that did end up, I mean, I think it's mostly Michael Shanks, to be honest. He dated the one that the actress that played his on-screen uh wife, basically, Sharae. They
Oh, like they
they
dated
were
in real life.
they did in real life. Actually, the Harcesis is truly the child of Michael Shanks. So
Wait, who?
when she is the you might not get to this point, but Sharae comes back and the actress is pregnant.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
Yes, right. I think that's in season two. That child that she's pregnant with is actually his. So they
In
were
real life?
in real life. So it's really funny because in the show it's actually the child of the enemy of Apophis, but it's actually really Michael Shanks' child.
Oh my God. Whoa. My mind has been blown. Like I
Okay.
even thought like I just thought that was a fake pregnancy. I didn't even think it was
Nope.
like in whoa.
Totally real.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's interesting. So were they just like dating or were they married or like
I mean, I think they lived together. Like, I think it was a
Hmm.
serious relationship, but I think they, at some point, I don't know how, I mean, I don't know the details. I just know, I mean, later he's married to someone that I think he did a guest spot on the show of, and then she actually joined the Stargate cast later,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
play Dr. Lamb. So, yeah.
Yeah. And they now have like multiple kids together. Wow, that's interesting. See, I never knew that. That like blows my mind.
These important Stargate facts.
Maybe that's like a good place to end is like, does anyone know any of the dirty details of who was actually dating him on the set?
Yeah, I mean characters and because yeah, I'm also curious because I mean I know of really like the two big relationships, and I know there's others that are, kind of small and subtle. Or who is your
Yeah.
favorite, like, smaller relationship or implied relationship in the show? Because there's a lot of implied
Yeah.
ones. Especially I think Carter has a lot of implied, especially people that were super interested in her or people that she kind of dated, and it's just unfortunately that it didn't end well for most of them.
I haven't
You'll
gotten
get to
through
that.
to too much of that. Like I have like noticed like Daniel kind of always teasing her. And then there was that poor guy that like got the disease or whatever that like he couldn't get the correct shot because he was like allergic to it and like he like I think he ended up dying.
No,
I think
I'm pretty sure he
did he
lives
live?
because you see him in a later episode. They don't really talk about him
Oh,
again, but you see him later. Like,
oh,
I've seen
yeah.
him in a later one. Because at the time, I was like, did he die or did he live? And I looked it up, and like, he is at least that character somehow is in a later episode. So I don't think he
Yeah.
died.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay, cool.
We can practically do a whole episode on the characters that fall in love with other characters and end up meeting bad fates.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So yes, so I guess like just thank you to our few little listeners out there. If you could please share our podcast and our videos and share with other Stargate fans, that would be amazing. And just put any comments about, I guess, let's see, in this episode we were talking about the characters. So like what do you think of the main cast of the characters and what are your thoughts about
Yep. And
it?
if you don't watch Stargate already, definitely give it a try,
Yes.
especially because of the character development and cast.